I'll throw out to the audience in a second for questions. I think Mr. Bokros, who didn't come in on that round, any thoughts arising from that? I think what we were trying to choose in a way was a pecking order of what to do fastest and what looked most feasible. And again, with your own experience in mind, what would you learn from that? What might you not repeat in Ukraine that happened in Hungary or the other way?
Thank you very much. I have a few important comments to make. First, I don't like this debate on sequencing. We have had that debate for more than 20 years by now, and there is no settled wisdom about which reform should come first and which reform can wait. I very much think that governments have to move on a broad front and, as I said, reach a so-called critical mass of reforms in the largest possible area in most areas. Why is that? It is because, unfortunately, experience of the transition countries shows that reforms are not irreversible. Everything is reversible, and history also shows that reforms have also a kind of a cyclical life, pretty much the same way as we have political cycles. And sometimes there is a reform wave and then an anti-reform wave, even in countries where you would not think that certain reforms can be reversed. Let me just highlight the example of my own country. Hungary was one of the first, together with many others, to implement a pension reform, which was at that time very much supported by the World Bank and others, the so-called multi-pillar reform, which meant that in addition to a pay-as-you-go system, we implemented a mandatory private pension fund system, plus also a voluntary pension fund system. The third element is not really important because it's voluntary. So the hard part is the mandatory. Hungary was one of the first, and we felt that we could really enjoy the benefits of all these reforms for a long time. It is not a reform for tomorrow, it is a reform for a century, if you will. And then, unfortunately, 15 years later, the government abolished the mandatory private pension system by one stroke. So we are back in square one. Reforms are not irreversible. As a consequence, I would like to make two comments. One is that political will, Francis said, that is one of the most important requirements, and I fully agree with that, but it is not sufficient. It is necessary, but far from sufficient. We need two more things. One is ownership of those reforms by society and support of society, social acceptance, if you will. Which leads me to the next point, which is good marketing of those reforms by the government. So we need a long-term political consensus behind reforms, not just one radical-minded government which can implement something, and then comes the next government which, for the sake of being in opposition before, just abolished the whole bloody thing. And the last point is that we need administrative capacity. And certain reforms need a hell of a lot of administrative capacity. Pension reform is one, but the most difficult reform, which we have never implemented in a proper way in any of the former socialist countries, is healthcare, where you need even more political capital to be spent on convincing society that it is in their interest to undertake those reforms.
Thank you very much.